Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Women Platform on Hidayat TV. And this is your host, Sister Zeenat. So what is the purpose of this program? The purpose is we discuss the issues of women, the women of the West and in the East. So today in the studio, we have a very special guest from United States of America, Sister Maryam Muaddal. Assalamu alaikum, sister. How are you?
Walaikum assalam. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Could you please give a little introduction about yourself?
So I'm from America. I was raised there, and I graduated from high school and university. I did a bachelor's degree in accounting and business. And then I started teaching for a little bit. I used to teach in middle school and high school.
Wow.
And after that, I came to Iran, and I've been studying in the Hawza, Jamaat al-Zahra.
That's seminary, Islamic seminary.
Yes, Islamic seminary. And I've been studying there for the past several years, ever since 2014. So my major is in Islamic philosophy.
And you're doing your, right now?
I'm finishing up my master's.
You're finishing up your master's, yes. So you really have a good education and you can be very helpful to many ladies because you're from the West, you have a lot of experience from the United States of America about many issues of the women and the girls go through, and you can be a solution for many problems that usually girls, the youth, the women have it. So thank you so much for being here in the studio. So my question is all about that, especially I will be talking about the West, the Western life, you know. How can a woman live in a Western society while practicing the hijab, the covering?
So the topic today is hijab.
Yes, it is.
So hijab, as what do you know to mean hijab to be specifically? Like what's your opinion?
It's about covering. You know, your covering has to be loose. It should not be fitting, and the only thing you're allowed to show is your like face and your palms. Mm-hmm. And that is one explanation, in my opinion. And other one is like your hijab with your actions, mm-hmm. how you are in front of people, you know, and your deeds. So could you give your explanation, please?
So hijab, as you're saying, we as Muslims, whenever we discuss hijab, typically we think of the covering, the headscarf,
yes,
and the garment that women wear, and that's correct. In terms of it being, so your question was about how can women live in the Western society while practicing hijab. So there's a verse in the Holy Quran that's Ya ayyuhan nabi qul li azwajika wa banatika wa nisa'il mu'minina yudnina alayhinna min jalabibihinna dhalika adna an yu'rifanna fala yu'tayna wa kana Allahu ghafurur rahim. So it's saying in the verse, it says, O prophets, Ya ayyuhan nabi, tell your wives, your daughters, and the believing women, wa nisa'il mu'minin, to cover their bosoms and their breasts, their chests. And this will make them distinguishable from others and protect them from being bothered. Now, this verse speaks very, very strongly to me because I've actually experienced that practicing the hijab in the West while I was university and when I was working in America. And this verse is saying that, like, O Muslim believers, O mu'mineen, like, cover yourselves so that that people will be able to recognize you as a Muslim.
As a Muslim, yes.
Yeah. And so when the first thing when you see a Muslim woman and she's wearing hijab, you notice that she's a Muslim.
Yes.
Like, that definitely distinguished that.
Yes.
And this verse is specifically telling us that this is one of the reasons why we are told to wear hijab. And then it says that this will make you distinguishable, A, and B, it will protect you from being bothered.
Yes.
Now that's interesting because, like, I've had experiences. So when I was in university, I went to a polytechnic university. Now, a polytechnic university is a university where you have to do a lot of group work, and so we had a lot of group projects that I had to work with other students.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I remember sitting down in a group once, and we were working on a project, and one of the girls, she cursed, and she
cursed you?
No, she just cursed, and it's very normal to say things
like
that.
It's a very common thing.
No, and then the interesting part is that immediately she apologized. She's like, "Oh, I don't think I should be saying that in front of you." And
wow.
it was just because I was wearing the hijab, and she was like, "Yeah, you seem like like she understood
The
that.
respect they have for the hijab is
Yeah.
they know that even with mouth and eyes and your actions, they're supposed to be dignified. Even non-Muslims are aware of
Yeah.
that. Very good message you gave.
So it was interesting because it was a point, even for me, it was like, oh, wow, like that person recognized me, that I have certain boundaries. Because the hijab is a boundary.
Yes.
It's telling other people that I abide by certain rules and regulation of a religion. And because of that, people respect you and know that you have certain boundaries that they have to follow and they have to acknowledge. And so that creates a respect that they have. And in this verse, it's saying that this is better for you so that you'll be protected and that people won't bother you. I had another experience as well. When I was an accounting degree, and when I was working at an accounting firm for a while, my coworkers told me that our boss is more he's more respective to me when I'm there, like in front of them. When I wasn't around, he would say whatever he would want to, say mean things, but then in front of me he wouldn't say any of
He
that.
used to be very calm, like dignified.
Yeah.
He used to watch his words.
Yeah, it was interesting. And they said it's only because you wear the hijab and we don't. And I found that so interesting, although he was a practicing Christian.
It is. It is definitely.
So it was like this verse really spoke to me in those points of my life. And I was like, wow, like it's amazing what the hijab can do and how it functions, and we don't really realize it until you practice it.
Definitely, we don't realize, because the beautiful experience that you shared was like just used to wear one headscarf, right? Over there, wearing one headscarf, how people, not only you, but because looking at your discipline, how people behave themselves. I shouldn't be cursing. There are people who are not using, even they are like balancing their own actions, you know. It is like you're even teaching the other person.
Yeah.
Like this is the effects of hijab. So definitely that's very nice. So so about the, how can a woman live, like were you encouraging the Western ladies to wear a headscarf? Because over there's a headscarf thing. And what about the headscarf that goes with like a fitting dresses that looks, you know, that beautifies your beauty, your figure? Because there's also hijab with a fitting dress.
Yeah.
And there is also hijab with a loose dress. So how could you encourage the real meaning of hijab, wearing what kind of a dress?
Like to the younger
Generations, yeah.
I mean, it's hard. I feel like a lot of times the problem is that we want to start with hijab.
Yes.
But the problem is that if you don't understand why you're not doing it,
Yeah.
it becomes too difficult. And that's the thing. We need to understand why we wear hijab before we wear hijab. And I think that's why a lot of times you find youth that they start wearing hijab and then they take it off.
Yes.
And it's because they didn't understand why they wore it from the get-go. And the question is like, well, what's the point of hijab? Why do we wear hijab? And the reason is because like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us to practice this. We have this in our religion to practice the hijab, and is to get closer to Allah. So that's the main reason. Now, when we talk about hijab, like for example, we just talked about how hijab affects others and how it causes other people to respect us. So those are philosophies of hijab. Those are the hikmah, the wisdom behind hijab. But that's different from the primary reason we wear hijab. Like those are the benefits that hijab helps us, how it helps us, but that's not the reason why we wear hijab, because you can find 1,000 reasons for it.
Yeah.
But the main purpose is to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a Muslim, as a practicing Muslim, we believe that Allah's created us. He's the one who's raised us. He's the one who's given us food. He created the moon, the stars, the sun, all of this because of us. He's our sustaining. He's our protector. He's done all these things for us. He's blessed us with all these blessings. He's the bestower of all the blessings. And so he's given all these things to us so that we worship him, so that we get closer to him. And that's the primary reason why we wear hijab, is to get closer to him, so that we get closer to Jannah, to paradise, and stay away from the hellfire.
Basically, you're obeying the commands
Yes,
of Allah
yeah.
subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when you claim that you love someone, I love you, even your own parents, like mom, I love you, dad, I love you. The moment they say, okay, go and do this work, you say, okay, I love you, but I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
So it's heartbreaking, right? Because they are saying something for your own good. Obeying, love comes with obeying. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created the entire universe and galaxies, he knows what we don't know, because he created us. So it's better for us to be in hijab and then start our life. So Even one question, did you always wear a headscarf since you were 9 years old?
I think I started when I was like around that
You
age.
were, so you had that interest of wearing the
So
hijab
for me, it was my mom practiced it really well.
in America.
In America, she always did, and I think for me personally, my role model for wearing the hijab was my mom.
Exactly.
And so because she wore it so well, I mean, when I first wanted to start wearing it, my parents were a little bit hesitant to let me start because they were afraid that I would start wearing it and I would take it off. But eventually I won that battle and I was like, no, I'm going to wear it. I know I want to wear it, and I did, and I wore it. And I looked up to my mom. Alhamdulillah, it was a blessing that I had that role model who practiced hijab in that way. So I guess it's different for everyone, like how you end up starting it.
Exactly. So did you go to public school or private school?
I went to both. I've done
Both.
yes.
So actually the problem comes over here in like going to public school,
Yeah.
there's a lot of mockery on hijab.
Yeah.
So how did you handle that situation?
I mean, when I first started wearing it, I think it was a little hard because I knew the students had seen me the year before, and they were like asking, they would tug on
You
my
were
hijab.
a kid, 9 years, 10 years old,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I mean, I did have that like experience where like the kids would like they would question why you're wearing it,
Yeah.
and like they would tug it. I don't really remember too much from that time, but I mean, you just have to explain like why you're wearing it, and then kind of explain it to them. When you explain something to a person, most of the time, the reason why they ask or they tug or they say things is just like they don't understand.
Because they don't understand exactly. I
Yeah,
can
so
understand.
it's important to be able to explain to them like why do I practice hijab, and also not just even just wearing the hijab, also like the barrier between so like when you go for interviews or you go for interviews for work or for school, people usually want to handshake your hand, and there's always that barrier where like, I'm sorry, I can't handshake. And so I found it very easier if you let them know ahead of time, like send them an email like, oh, I can't.
Send them an email?
Send them an email, yes. This is something that me and my sister have been doing for a while.
Wow.
And let them know that we can't
So at
handshake
your
the
job,
opposite.
you were very open, even for your interviews, that I wouldn't be able to shake
Yeah, I
hands?
would tell them because this is the thing. When you
Yeah.
allow it to happen right that second, that minute, what ends up happening is that it's hard to explain it in the moment. But if you allow them ahead of time, you let them know, they're a little bit more easier about it, and you don't get caught up in that awkward situation. They're holding the hand out, and you're like, I'm sorry, I can't handshake.
Okay, send them an email. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a very good example. Send them an email while you're looking for a job.
Yeah.
Just, I found this very beautiful. When someone usually wants to shake hands with you, you usually say, okay, and then you feel embarrassed that you're shaking hands. How
Yeah.
can I say? Because
Yeah.
you can't, you don't have the guts.
Yeah.
You give a very good example.
Yeah.
Send them an email. I like it.
Or let them know. Like I remember for my graduation, I let them know ahead of time that I can't, can't shake my hand. So like when I went up there, they were all like this. So it was nice.
Wow.
Alhamdulillah, yeah.
That was so nice.
Yeah.
Is it not a barrier in the Western countries looking for a job? Is it not because of your hijab if you don't get a job?
I mean, it can cause problems, but again, you wouldn't want to work in a place where they're Islamophobic anyway. So if that's going to cause an issue, then it's better that you don't work there. But I think it's really important to recognize that Allah is the sustainer. He's the one He's Al-Razzaq. He's the one who gives us sustenance. And to recognize that that if you step in the way of Allah, and He will help you as well. So if you remember that He will be there to help you, and inshallah you'll be able to find a better job that they understand your religious role, the religious obligations that you have toward Allah.
I really love that when you said that, because usually when we are going out for a job interview, we are usually scared. Okay, I'm a graduate, Islamophobia is going on, there's a less percentage for me to get a job with a headscarf. Maybe it's better if I take off my hijab, I can get a job. Your friends advise you, sometimes your parents advise you, sometimes your companions advise you, and then you get weak in faith. You want to do hijab, but you are like, okay, without hijab I can make a better career. And the answer that you made is that Allah is the provider of the risk. He is the provider for everything. The one who provided the non-Muslim is going to provide you. So, and this is a test of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The faith, the feelings that you're going through in your life is something what is really important. Thank you so much for listening to us. We will be back after a short break. platform. This is your host, Sister Zinat, and with me I have a very special guest from United States of America, Sister Mariam Muaddal. And we have been talking about hijab, especially in the West. So, Assalamu alaikum, sister, welcome back. So, our question was, again, we were talking about hijab in the West. Is it a barrier to wear a hijab?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And so we were discussing hijab, and we were saying that, so I think it's important when we're discussing a topic that we first take a step back. When you want to look at a painting, it's really important to look at it from afar first and then look at it closely, because if you just look at it closely first, you won't be able to see the full picture and understand like the details and appreciate the details. And so I kind of want to do the same thing about this topic. It's important that when we're discussing hijab, we define what is the outlook that we have, what is the paradigm we're looking at. And so like when we're discussing the outlook of the topic, are we looking at it from a secular lens, or are we looking at an Islamic lens? Now, if you look at it from a secular lens, within the West, typically we define as a human being to be only their body, their physical aspect, and our life is limited to all the time from where we're born until when we die, and that's the limit of our life. And now, if you just look at the hijab and just see it from that lens, it won't make any sense. It's like, why would you do that to yourself? But if we change the perspective and look at it from an Islamic paradigm, it makes more sense. Now, I want to start off with discussing a part of the story of Prophet Adam. Now, in the story of Prophet Adam, there's a part where Adam and Eve are in paradise, and Shaitan comes to them and tells them to eat from the tree. And they do. They are tricked into eating it, thinking that they'll become eternal. And it says in the Quran that فَكَلَا مِنْهُمْ فَبَدَتْ لَهُمَا سَوْآتُهُمَا وَتَفِقَا يَخْسَفَانِ عَلَيْهِمَا مِنْ وَرَقَةِ الْجَنَّةِ وَعَصَى آدَمَ رَبَّهُ فَغَوَى. So they both ate from it, as from the fruit of the tree, and their nakedness became evident to them. They began to stitch over themselves with the leaves of paradise. Adam disobeyed his Lord and went amiss. So this is interesting, because in this story, when Adam and Eve are in paradise, until that point, they didn't realize their physical aspect. Until that point, they only recognized that they had an immaterial soul. They only paid attention to their soul. And so when they eat from the fruit of the tree, that's when they realize their physical aspect, and they become naked. And they start covering themselves. Now, it's really critical to understand that, and this is what I'm talking about paradigm, is to understand that there's two aspects to a human being. One is the physical aspect, the material aspect, and one is the immaterial soul, the ruh. As it says, نَفَخْتُ فِيهَا مِنْ رُوحِي in the Quran. So it's important to understand we have these two aspects, and that when you're wearing a hijab, when you're wearing a covering, you are strengthening the immaterial soul. You're strengthening the ruh, the immaterial aspect. Now, we see it like during Ramadan, when you're fasting, after 30, especially toward the end of it, you feel more spiritual, right? You feel more closer to Allah. And that's because you strengthen your immaterial soul, your ruh. That aspect is strengthened. And it's because you've limited the physical aspect, you limited your eating, and you've strengthened that ruh, the soul, that
and
aspect.
then you get used to very slowly with that, right? And you don't even feel like you're fasting.
Yeah, especially toward the end of it, becomes second nature. You don't even becomes normal, right? And it's the same thing with hijab, is that when you practice hijab on an individual level, what ends up happening is you're strengthening the ruh, and you're covering the material soul. And I mean, if you think about it, when we're praying to Allah, we're also strengthening the ruh, and we also have to cover, right? We have to practice hijab, even if there's no mahram there.
Yes, we have to.
We have to, and so it's
even
part
if there's
of it.
Nobody in the room, or it's just a husband, we have to have the complete covering. The rules has to be followed.
Yeah. So you're strengthening that aspect to us, that aspect in ourselves. Now, it's also important to add into the picture is that the fact that within the Islamic frame is that our lives aren't just limited to this world, right? Is that when we die, the ruh ends up being separated from the body.
Yes.
كل نفس ذائقة الموت, like that each nafs, that each person will taste death.
Yes.
Right? And so when that happens, our bodies are put into the grave, but what remains is our ruh.
Yes.
And so we go into barzakh.
That is the soul.
Yes, that's the soul, right? So we go into barzakh, and then from there we have the day of judgment, and from there we either end up in heaven
It's
or
life
hell.
after that, then the day of judgment.
So basically, our life continues. It's not the end of life here. And so when you're wearing the hijab, you're getting closer to Allah. Your ruh is getting closer to Allah. Your ruh is getting closer to Jannat. And that it makes it easier for you to separate from this world because you're not as close to this world. You strengthen the ruh. That part is stronger. So when Israel comes and takes our ruh away, you're less attached to the world.
In the world,
Yeah, so that becomes easier to leave this world and depart from it and to enter, the next world.
Alhamdulillah, that you spoke about, how if you obey the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for His love, if you accept hijab and live by the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're actually not attached with the worldly life. You're more attached with your spiritual life, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when the angel of death comes and takes you, your pain is very less because your attachment is not there. Because your pain will be more during the time of death when you have too much attached with the worldly life. Very beautifully explained, sister. So what do you think, does hijab limit women?
So does it? So that's why I brought the whole frame
Topic.
the topic. Yeah. So it in one sense it limits the physical aspect, but then it empowers the immaterial aspect. It empowers the ruh and the soul. So so it's a yes and no. So in the sense that you do limit one aspect to yourself, but then it's to strengthen another aspect.
Because as a woman, it's very natural to think, okay, if a youth is watching this show, and you have been a youth also, very, very, very closely, very close time. So the experience that you want to dress up like them. You want to be without hijab. You want to do a lot of things that you're attracted to, the worldly life, I would say. But still you're not doing this for the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everything is accountable, right? Even at the time of when you're in your 20s and your beauties that you have, that you want to do a lot of things and you limit yourself. But you see a lot of advantages for limiting yourself in many things. You see a lot of respect coming your way for not doing many things, especially with your actions, right? That's what you give a beautiful example when you were in the university, how in front of you in your job also, how people respected you, their language, their tongue, because of you're wearing a headscarf. So very automatically, naturally, people start respecting you. That's very right. So the question that comes, like people say that the word hijab is not mentioned in the Holy Quran. Where it is mentioned, very simple, it's not there.
So when we discuss hijab, the wording is not hijab, but the actual concept is, and it says, this is a surah, in Surah Nur, verse 31, it says, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنَّ ولا يبدين زينتهن إلا ما ظهر منها ولا يضربن بخمارهن على جيوبهن. And it says, say to the believing woman, قل للمؤمنين, that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, that they should not display their beauty and ornaments except that what appear thereof. They should draw their veils over their bosoms and not display their beauty except to their husbands. And so it says, like, it uses the word khimar.
What is that?
So khimar is a covering. So during the time of the Prophet, when our Prophet ﷺ first came to the people of Mecca, the women used to wear a garment. They would cover their head, so it was like a head covering, and it was called khimar. But then they would tie it from the back.
From the back.
Back.
Yeah.
And so their necks and their bosoms would show.
Yeah.
So this verse is saying that tell the believing woman to take their khimar and bring it up front.
And
to
front,
cover the front, yes. So it's already saying that, okay, you guys are wearing khimar.
Your khimar is there, means
your headscarf is there, but then cover the front as well.
Cover the neck and also your bosoms, like the chest.
Yes.
So this is very point that you're saying, that your chest part should not be revealing. That it should be like that. Okay.
So it is in the Quran. It's just that I think it seems like people misunderstand. Either they haven't seen the verse or they don't understand what this khimar mean. And so it's really important when we're discussing the Quran and we understand the context and what the word specifically means. And so specifically, it's mentioned in the Quran that the hijab should be practiced by women. And not only just that, so how many rakat is your morning prayer?
2 rakat.
It's 2 rakat prayer. Is it in the Quran?
Exactly. Now you have like, did they teach you how to read salat in Quran? Who taught us? The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, right?
So not everything, our fiqh rulings are actually, there's not that many fiqh rulings within the Quran. There's like around 500 verses that talk about fiqh, but that's it. And we have much more rulings, obviously, within Islam. So most of our fiqh does not come from the Quran. So when people say that, it's like, well, what about the other things? How come you just you cherry pick hijab and then you leave everything else out? So it's not much of a good argument anyway.
I mean, there's also one more thing, like we have like great Muslims in the communities everywhere, but they don't do hijab, and they say your heart should be beautiful. That's, how would you encourage them for hijab? For those wonderful ladies.
Your heart should be beautiful, but you can make it even more beautiful by practicing the hijab. And so it's the thing, like, you're limiting your beauty for the household, for your husband, and rather than displaying it for everyone else to see. I mean, it's the same thing when you kind of become strong and healthy, you limit your eating to healthy food, right?
Yeah.
You try to eat more vegetables and fruits. You limit your junk food eating. You limit that, right? And it's a hardship that you do, but because you have a certain goal in mind to attain that, you have to limit yourself. And so it's the same thing. If you want to become closer to Allah, you have to limit yourself in certain aspects. And so this is one of them. So if you want to get closer to Allah, if you want a beautiful life in the hereafter, do you want to be in the best castles in Jannah, if you want to have the best husbands in Jannah,
if you want to be the role model of Bibi Fatima Zahra salamullah
you want to follow her
alaiha,
lead,
and Bibi Zainab salamullah alaiha, because we cry for them, especially
Yes.
Bibi Zainab. Oh, they took off the niqab and everything. We cry for their niqab, but we particularly have to have our own hijab first, because this was a very big tragic, the event of Karbala. So we even have to understand how important hijab is for us, because Bibi Zainab salamullah alaiha was an example,
Exactly.
role model of hijab for us, very beautiful. So the wonderful youth of the Western countries, of any country, Eastern world, if they want to start the hijab, how would you encourage them to start the hijab then?
I would say that depending on, I mean, every person's personality is different, so it depends on that. Some people can jump in cold turkey and just start wearing it, and for some people I would advise, if you want to do it gradually, maybe start wearing longer sleeves, cover your body first for a while and get used to that, and then put on like the scarf, the headscarf, so that you gradually lean into it if it's difficult for you, because I mean everyone's situation is different, so I can't give you a complete like, oh, this is the prescription. No, like you have to see what's your situation and how things are, and depending on how your background and where you're living and all of that has a huge effect on the way you want to practice it. Also, I would advise to strengthen your belief in Allah. Like the more closer you get to Allah, the more you strengthen your belief, the more when you read the Quran, recite du'as, all these things will increase your faith in Him. And when your faith has increased in Him, you're not scared from anything. Like when you know that Allah's your protector, He's the one who will defend you. Allahu yudafa alladhina amanu. Inna Allahu yudafa an alladhina amanu. It says that in the Quran, that in Surah Hajj, that Allah is the one who defends those who believe. And so He's the one who will defend you. He's your protector. And so what do you have to worry when everything's at His disposition? He can command whatever He likes. He is the one who's given you all the sustenance. He is the one who's protected you since you were a baby. He was the one who got you here. So what are you scared about?
Just believe in Allah, that you say tawakkal to Allah, right? Just believe in Allah for every aspect for your life, whether it's your income, your kids, your relationship, finding a spouse, which we will talk about very soon. We are going to come to all this topic very soon. We have just started with the youth topic. I'm more like look at the youth and the woman, because the youth becomes a woman, and then she's raising another youth. A woman is doing that. So this is really very important. If you read the Holy Quran with the meaning, because it's very simple. People say we don't have time to take classes. I don't think so. That's true. If you have time to be on WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram, spend such a long time making TikTok videos, and we have time, right? Just put a headphones and then go to the translation of Quran in the native language that you understand, English or whatever language, and start listening to the Holy Quran. It really changes your soul. And because I think this is my personal experience myself in my life, and I did not know the tafsir of Quran, the details of Holy Quran, or nothing about it. So I just knew the Quran. I just knew that I used to recite the surahs and surahs. Now I had the desperation of reading the Holy Quran myself, and working like 9 to 5 and coming back home and tired. I didn't know when to go out for classes. I just started putting my headphones and started listening to the meaning of Quran, just the meaning of Quran in the language I understood. You know, whether it's English or whether it's any language, Urdu or, you know, whatever languages, they're Persian. And then there was so much knowledge that I started getting it. It changed my life too. As a youth, I'm talking about. And it changed in so many unimaginable ways that I could really give this advice to all the youth and all the women, whatever problems you're going through in your life, whether it's education or income or relationships or Islamophobia or present situation, stress. You know, the worst thing is we have stress. The worst thing is stress. Take protection from Quran, know the meaning, and try to go in details of the Holy Quran, and life is definitely is going to be beautiful. And how we can get close, you would definitely, Allah is going to guide you, because you know it says if you take one step towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take 10 steps towards you. You know, He wants you as a baby to come towards you. So thank you so much, Sister Mariam Wadil, for being here in the studio, for talking to the youth and the women about very interesting topic. We have more interesting topic here in the next exciting episode. So please, dear audience, dear viewers, stay tuned for another exciting topics. We will be talking about various problems of the youth and the women and how to handle those problems very nicely. And inshallah, Allah